Okay. This is gonna be a demonstration for doing the second practice value study. Okay, last class I had you all do a practice 3D sphere, and then have you do this tonal value scale on the left side. Um, I'm gonna make sure you guys get this paper back. I'm gonna try to grade this today, and then you got this as a resource. But definitely from the second worksheet though, or the first worksheet that we're working on though, definitely this value scale that you've created here. This is gonna be really helpful for doing this more complex value study of these different shapes. Okay, so. Um, Here's the trick with like shading with value though is we kind of want to get rid of these lines in the drawing. Now if you do like the values properly, or like incorporating your areas of lights and your grays and your darks, it should kind of create the illusion of lines throughout your whole drawing, especially if like the lighting is really good. This is probably like the only time I've ever seen like a Xerox copy actually look really nice. This is actually got some really good different tonal shades of the different shapes. Um, when you do finish like your drawing, this is like how it should look, or should look close to this. You can kind of see like most of these lines. You don't really see them too much though. I could have shaded some of these things a little bit better, but if you do shade it properly, though, it's like you're gonna create more of a realistic look with your 3D shapes, and then obviously when we try to translate this with your still life, from the example we looked in the warm up, we're gonna try our best to kind of not incorporate too many lines of the drawing, but let the values of the contrast of lights and darks, create those lines for those shapes and forms that we're creating. Okay, I'm gonna go over just a few of these shapes. Though I'm not gonna go over all of them. Obviously, we've done the sphere before already, so I'm not gonna really go over that. I'm gonna mainly go over like these more angular shapes, because it is a little bit differently how you had to shade them. So, I'm gonna start with the this shape right here. We'll start with like the most complex one. You can kind of guess like what the other ones are. Um, you definitely want to take like those value scale though, but you can see like how like different sections of this I want to say it's more like a boxy sphere. Like this area is like a light gray, this area is like a darker gray. So like this is actually going more inwards, and then this is like kind of popping out a little bit further out to the light. So the way to the trick to doing these angular forms though is all these flat areas though, they're always going to be the same value. Okay, so you might see some slight tints of like a darker gray into like a lighter gray, but if you really squint your eyes though, it's really all that same gray though. Okay, so really the trick to doing this though is and I do like the lightest light. Like this area right here, I would just shade this as like the lightest gray. Okay, and then unlike the sphere that you would typically do up here, where you change it from like a light gray to like a darker gray, we're gonna try to keep this whole triangular shape that one light gray. Okay, even if we kind of look at maybe some areas might be a little bit darker, some might be a little bit lighter. Okay, but the trick to doing these more angular shapes. When I say like angular, I'm talking about like like this like kind of trapezoid shape, this rectangle. These are all like flat shapes, so it's not like a round shape. So it's always going to be a flat shape. This is going to be like that light gray. We kind of see that same light gray up here too. So all those areas that are light gray, though, I would just shade that as those values. This one's a little bit darker, and then this one's a little bit lighter, but we'll keep it the same value though. So this is going to be a little bit lighter. And this is still a light gray though, but we'll keep it like the same value. We'll go a little bit darker though. And we can always layer the values if we need to. And this is gonna be a pure white here. Okay, now when you do like these other ones though, okay, you gotta squint your eyes though when you look at it. This is still a darker gray than this one, but it's not as dark as this one down here. Okay, so I would just kind of move on to like this next area here, and then a couple of different ways you can do it. You can press a little harder with your pencil, and if it's still not dark enough, just remember you can always layer. You can always shade it again. So you can all go in different directions too. You can do cross hatching. Or you can do like even more than cross hatching. You can do like quadruple hatching. Okay, but this is a little bit like a darker gray here. And then, you can see like, I always like looking at next to it. So this one's like an even darker gray on this side here. So really it's just your shading on what you're observing. So, you're kind of working all those values, but you can kind of see how it's like kind of creating the illusion of lines though with the contrast that we see. So I'm gonna go a little darker with this here just to make it pop out more. But try to keep it like that same consistent gray. And then this gray here against that gray, we see that it's creating that illusion of a line because of the contrast. And then this one's like a darker gray too. So we're gonna go a little bit darker here. Okay, but once you keep shading though, it's gonna look kind of like this when you're done. Or you see like still the different grays though, but it's like kind of creating the illusion of lines, in those areas. The same thing like the these shapes too. So let me finish this shape first. So just gonna finish this shape here. Oh yeah, and then also under the shapes too, there's what we call like a cast shadow. So this part's gonna be like really really dark, and then these shadows, it may fade into like a darker gray or lighter gray depending on like how close it is to the object. Okay, but most times the cast shadows are like your darkest darks. So it's kind of like the same thing like under the sphere. You just want to make this like your darkest dark. Because this is like a shadow being casted on the ground here. This one you'll make a dark gray. Okay, but any of the angular shapes though, it's always the same value. So this one whole side of this rectangle here, this is gray. So this gray against this white is kind of creating the illusion of that line. And then this gray that you're doing right here is going to differentiate the two different sides. Okay. So we see like a darker gray here. And you can kind of go in any order though. It's just always kind of pay attention to the value scales. All these different grays will, create the illusion of lines, if you do it properly. So there's a little bit of a cash out under the cone here. Okay, but you're really just observing what you see, and there's a little bit of gray here because of that. Okay, so you'll just, practice shading, add more layers to it. If you feel like it's not dark enough, always, shade more if you need to. Okay, now the background though, I'm not gonna go over that a little bit more, but just kind of keep in mind that there's gradients. I would probably do the background last. This is probably gonna take you the longest time to do the background. Do the shapes first, and then if you have time, you can do the background. Okay, but cone's kind of the same as a sphere. It's just one side it's gonna be darker, it's gonna be lighter. You go from a gradual light to dark. Same as the sphere. Because it's like a rounder shape. Okay, it's not like a flat shape, it's a rounder shape. All right.